Na 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 hey ya na ha ya na na hey ya hey ya. Well, it's good to be back in Chicago at Michael Jordan Steakhouse talking apologetics. And when I'm studying apologetics, and the more I study Jesus, the more I understand that Jesus defined himself as the truth. As he said in John's Gospel, I am the way, I am the truth. He said, if you hold to my teachings, you will hear the truth, and the truth will set you free. And then when Pontius Pilate famously questioned him, who are you? Are you a king? Jesus said to him directly, I have come into the world that I should bear witness to the truth, and everyone who hears my voice hears the truth. So on and on and on, we hear truth throughout the Bible. It appears about roughly 250 times throughout the Bible. So this tells us that truth, there's something going on here. And how important truth is, philosopher Peter Kreeft uses this analogy to show why we don't believe in Santa Claus anymore. Because believing in Santa Claus gave us two very good virtues that we did when we were children. It made us very happy and it made us very good. Now, being very happy and very good are important virtues in life. So why don't we believe in Santa Claus anymore? Well, because it's not true. So as Kreeft shows, truth trumps everything. Now, let's apply it to our world today. Because today in our culture, there's this kind of concept to tear down this concept of truth. You'll hear people say, well, everything's true, or it's true for you, but it's not true for me. But how could something be true and not true at the same time? That's like saying a thing is a tree and it's not a tree at the same time. It's what philosophers call a logical contradiction. In the media, you have advertisements, and you notice the ad man doesn't, make carefully reasoned arguments that why you should listen to his ad, but rather he uses more of emotions and kind of tries to play off your emotions and directs those feelings and harnesses to his own benefit of serving his interest, not so much himself. And then we see this throughout the media. If you have speakers, politicians, musicians, whatever, they try to elicit feelings and give these kind of grand, vague states of mind. They use terms that are highly emotive in their response. Words like transcendent, and wonder, and awe. Words that carry great emotional transcendence to their listeners, but there's no concreteness to them. And they seem to be saying something profound, but they're not making a specific claim. It's kind of vague. It's kind of fairy tale language. So instead of truth, our culture plays off our emotions and feelings, and you see this in the ad world, and the media in general, and our pop culture with the entertainment industry, music and movies and whatnot. This concept, hey, if it feels good, do it. And look at this person, they're trendy, they look cool, they look interesting. So it kind of appeals to our senses rather than appeals to our intellect or to whether something's true or not. Because our culture looks at truth and say, well, it's kind of bland, boring, and restrictive. Because yes, by definition, truth has to be restrictive because truth, it kind of cuts out all this cacophony of noise directed at our emotions and feelings. Also, the truth is really hard to get at because it requires great time, study, and thought to get to understand what something is true. So it's not so exciting and not so interesting. The other thing is that the truth can be in conflict with our feelings and our emotions. In other words, everything we hear in our culture of, do this, do that, listen to this group, we're right, they're wrong, basically boils down to this. What do I want to be true and what is true? Because those are two different questions. What I want to be true is based off of feelings. What is true is a reality that we try to get at. And it takes great thought and effort to get there. Now, if we think about it, humanity did not create itself. So the truth wouldn't come from us, it would come from that being that created us. In other words, I didn't create myself, I didn't create the physical engineering of my human body plan, my reproductive, my nervous system, my sensory equipment. I didn't create any of that. It just kind of showed up in the world, and all my physical parts are working correctly. I had nothing to do with it, and I have this conscience and ability to think and reason, which I had nothing to do with. So I didn't will myself into existence. Okay, now if I know that, that I didn't create myself, me being the authority of my, my emotions and my feelings, determining the truth, is probably not a good idea. I would recognize, my emotions would be dubious at best. Rather, I should look to the entity that made me, and that entity, by the way, proclaimed they were truth. So I look to that entity, not to my emotions, to determine what is true or not true. Kind of like when people, buy a child's bike, or we buy something and it has assembly instructions. It makes more sense to listen to that entity that created that design on how to assemble that, that bike or whatever we buy, rather than listen to, this is how I want to assemble the bike, or this is how I think it should be assembled to the bike. So once we do that, things start to begin to make sense. And then we'll also see that truth is in conflict to what we want to believe, because the gospel is rejected by man. After all, when the truth came into life, did not humanity kill the truth because it didn't like it? So when we look at Christianity and we look at the truth, we have to look at the big picture and look at the way of reasoning that Jesus does in the Gospels and not the culture at large. Now, the interesting thing is that Jesus kind of tips his hand for us to do this in the parable of the sower. And you notice in the parable of the sower, he says, if you want to hear the kingdom of heaven, the person who receives God's message at first with joy, with, this great emotion, he receives it, but since he has no roots, it doesn't last for very long, and then it's gone. Then he goes on in the next couple of verses and he describes the person who receives it and who understands it. Then they will receive the true message of the kingdom of heaven. So how do you understand something? Well, obviously you don't understand something through feelings or emotions. Rather, you understand something through understanding it, through thought, through study, through thinking it through. Then when you understand the truth, Jesus tells us, then your emotion will kick in, because as Paul showed us when he defined love in 1 Corinthians, that he rejoices in the truth. It's kind of like when I was a kid, everyone was trying to describe Mozart's music to me. And they would say, well, it's just this beautiful music that's so inspiring and so, and kind of describing it more of an emotional aspect. To hear Mozart's music and I think, well, it doesn't seem so great to me. But now as an adult, and specifically living in Nashville, I understand why Mozart's music is so beautiful. Because now I know, and as I've learned, this is why Mozart's music is so beautiful, is because it's this kind of creation, this music is hard to compose, and especially at that era, it took a genius to kind of play that type of music. It's very hard to compose that type of music. So once you understand the intricacies of musical composition, then you will appreciate the work of Mozart, because you understand how hard it is, rather than just kind of an emotional, it just seems so amazing. Now, the interesting thing about it is that when we apply this to, the devil, this kind of seems like I'm going off topic here, but when we look at the devil and how the devil comes to us throughout salvation history in the Bible, the devil doesn't come through this, kind of using his brute force and strength to tear us down as this, big beast. Rather, he comes playing off our emotions. He comes as kind of a sly, clever being that uses kind of savvy marketing and selling techniques to play off our emotions. We see this in Genesis, when he's talking to Adam and Eve about wanting to eat the fruit. And then again, when he appears at Jesus, when Jesus is being tempted, he says, well, if you worship me, I will give you all the splendors of the world, and all the kingdoms will bow down to you. This is how the devil basically appears throughout the Bible. It's interesting, the devil kind of appears, sounds like our modern day ad man, that doesn't come to us with truth and reason, rather that comes to us try to playing off our emotions. So in everything we approach in our life and in our relationships, our finances, and our career, it always makes more sense to make our decisions based on facts rather than feelings. to make our decisions based on truth rather than emotions. Because this is the way we can understand it through Jesus and how he taught us in the gospel and throughout the Bible. So at the end, truth trumps everything. And when we understand the truth, then our emotions are genuine, and then our emotions will kick in to really know the truth. Thank you.